He was born into a Jewish family. Somehow, he found his way to Christianity. Along the way, he was going to be a writer, wrote what he believed, what he hoped would be a best-selling novel. But God had other plans. His name is Clifford Goldstein. I'm John Bradshaw, and this is our conversation. Clifford, thanks so much for being here. Appreciate it a lot. Let's go back to the beginning. I'm going to ask you it this way. What do you remember about your childhood being raised in a sort of a Jewish context?
Well, it was very secular context. I often joke, I say the way we kept the holidays was like, they try to kill us, they failed, let's eat.
Right.
You know, that kind of a thing. So they sent me to Hebrew school. It lasted one day. I ran away from Hebrew school, went under the bridge and smoked a few cigarettes, and that was the beginning and end of my Hebrew education. But I was still very much Jewish, very much aware I'm Jewish culture. It never entered my mind that I was anything other than Jewish, even though I knew almost nothing about the Bible or the background or anything.
Yeah.
Very secular.
But tell me about your family.
Well, my family, as far as I know, they're Jewish, all the way back. Of course, I don't know after the war, probably almost all of them were. There's a room at the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., to a city of Kovno that got completely wiped out. And that was where my mother's side came from.
Oh.
From there. But my father had been raised in a pretty religious home. And then, he was a soldier in World War II and just sort of where was God and the Holocaust, that kind of thing. And my mother, very secular, I often joke later, my mother was a backslidden Unitarian.
What in the world would that look like, huh?
Yeah, just very. My mother actually had a spiritual side, but she, religion really wasn't part of our, we were culturally Jews, but I can't remember ever sitting down and us ever having a serious or any kind of in-depth conversation about, is there a God?
Yeah.
My father was always very tolerant. If somebody wants to believe, let them believe, but I don't have any memory in my family of any kind of sit down and talk about it. Though I do remember we were very literate, a lot of books, and I still remember there was a Bible.
Oh, there was.
Old and New Testament,
Yeah.
just sitting on the shelf. And I can remember I was maybe 14 or 15 and just picking up the New Testament. It was rare for me just to pick up a Bible. It was the Old and New Testament. And what I distinctly remember is going to the book of Revelation and reading the last few verses of the last chapter. But truly, it meant nothing to me. Old Testament, New Testament, it all meant nothing to me in terms of how I lived, or at least consciously anyway.
You said there are a lot of books around the home.
Yeah.
So what kind of books?
Oh my goodness, just lots. Well, I have an uncle who's a writer, had been a well-known writer. My grandfather had been an editor. So lots of novels. And I read a lot of novels and history books, and I can still remember some of these. There was one author named Thomas Wolfe.
Sure.
Not the contemporary Tom Wolfe of the electric Kool-Aid acid test you might be thinking of, but there was one who lived in the 20s and 30s. Thomas Wolfe, book novels called You Can't Go Home Again and Look Homeward Angels. Big, thick novels about loneliness and whatever. And I can remember as a child reading those novels and loving them. And that was kind of the stuff that spurred on me that I wanted to be a novelist.
So how early was this? Did you catch the writing bug?
Oh, quite young. I was always good in English. I was never a particularly great student at school. I never really applied myself that hard, but I did like English. And I got, honors English. And I used to write stuff. And sometimes the teachers used to accuse me of having plagiarized, because they just thought, they didn't think I could do that, So and again, I had an uncle who was a writer, a very well-known avant-garde writer, experimental fiction and so forth. And my grandfather was an editor. So it was, however it works, it was in the genes. And then yet I was a creative writing major in college.
Where'd you go to college?
University of Florida in Gainesville. And even though I was creative writing, and then it was there I decided I was going to write a novel. And I started a novel my senior year at college, and just started it. And that book consumed me. That was, I poured everything into the novel. Nothing else mattered. I used to tell people, I asked my uncle once, the writer, about how am I going to survive? And he says, look, if I knew how you could write and live, he says, I'd bottle it and we'd both get rich, because, he struggled years too, surviving. But in some ways I would tell people the novel impacted my life, controlled my life more than I controlled what was going with the characters in it, because nothing else mattered. Everything was subservient to writing the book, because I had to pour everything into it.
It's tough to be a successful writer. I mean, no matter who. I was reading the other day about a woman whose name I don't recall. Yeah. She was in the Midwest, moved to New York City, hoping she'd get there. She said more than 100 rejection letters for work that she'd sent here and there and there. And
see, it depends to how you define successful.
Right,
if you mean earning, there are some brilliant, incredibly successful writers in the sense they produce incredibly well done writing, and at every level you'd say successful. They just don't sell.
Sure.
All you got to do is look at the bestseller list, like the New York Times bestseller list, and really it's a lot of junk.
Yeah.
It really is not anymore Danielle Steele or Dean Koontz, just this, and every now and then there'll be one of these rare ones that's a literary tour de force, and yet at the same time sells.
Sure.
Okay, and it's very rare.
You find the authors that find the groove, start churning out a production line. There may be this schmaltzy sort of
they sell.
genre. They sell and sell and sell and sell.
Yeah. I don't really read any of that stuff, but it's tough because you look back at the history of writing, the novels that the greatest writers, people who are now considered the great writers, most of them. Many, like somebody like the Southern writer, William Faulkner, who's now like a god. I'm in college, and in the South, all we ever read was Faulkner. And for decades, the man starved.
Sure.
The man starved and struggled. And
it's interesting too. My daughter was doing some class where she got to read a bunch of books, and one was an African-American female author, and I wish I could remember her name, but I cannot. And the novel...
Toni Morrison?
No. She's far less well-known than Toni Morrison. The novel never really made it. In fact, the novel was criticized. The book, I think it was a novel, the book languished. And then it was discovered. And now suddenly it's this masterpiece. Kind of interesting how, doesn't it tell you too how authors, just like artists, you kind of got to get in good with the right people. Someone's got to like you and promote you.
Well, there's a certain amount of, I don't know how, just the right place at the right time, right connections. But
neither of us want to use the word luck, but if we did, you'd call it luck.
But if you really, because I even remember my uncle one time, because my uncle wrote his probably most famous novel had 80 rejections.
Wow.
Okay, and then it came out, a novel called Wittgenstein's Mistress, and it's hailed as a masterpiece. But even then, it never sold a lot. It never sold. And I can still remember him telling me, he goes, I've got this idea for this broad, wide novel, but I'm going to get into the subjectivism and it's going to kill me, in the sense that he knew it would be very hard. Yeah, he knew, and yet he did it anyway. I've got a number of his novels, and they are no scene, no summary, no plot. It's pure, ultimate postmodern. And yet somehow he pulls it off.
Yeah.
And the novels have been hailed. People, this is great stuff, but most people don't read them.
Yeah, they've been hailed, they just haven't been purchased.
Yeah. In fact, it was every now and then when I go into a bookstore, and I haven't done it in a while because I haven't been there, but I'd look on the shelf to see, and I haven't seen any of his books there for years. That's a little painful, but
sure.
But when you got the writing bug in you, you don't care. I say you don't care. You just got to write what's in you.
Yeah.
You write what's in you, and if it sells, great. If you got a way to earn a living, great. And if you can write and sell and earn and make money, great.
Yeah.
But if you got this thing in you, you just got to do it.
So you were writing a novel, it was consuming you, it was the big thing. Did you imagine then, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life? Or was it just a novel? Was this a
Oh, no, I knew
project?
I was going to write novels for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Oh, that was my intention.
That was
whatever
it.
happened with this one, I mean, I was going to start another one, and I was determined. That's the only thing I liked doing, the only thing I had any real talent for, and I poured myself into it. And it was a God to me.
Yeah.
And that's sort of where everything wound up. It was a God to me. And the funny thing is too, John, when I tell the whole story, what happened after I got rid of it, for 2 years, I couldn't tell that without a pain.
Sure.
And then one day it hit me, wow, this doesn't hurt me anymore.
Well, there are going to be people who are wondering what you mean by I got rid of it. So what did you do with this novel?
Well, the bottom line, and this is a whole long spiel, I was in the midst of all the writing, I was always somewhat of a seeker. I thought about it the other day when I talked to some of my old friends, and they said, well, Cliff, the one thing we remember you as, you were a seeker. And I did an incredible amount of traveling when I was young.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, I just traveled all over.
Abroad? You went overseas?
Yeah. When I was 17 years old, I saved up my money from high school. I had enough money, I went over to Europe with a friend of mine. I ditched him after 2 weeks. He was bugging me. I'd rather be alone. So I wandered around. I never saw him again.
And you were 17 wandering around
He was
Europe.
18. Yeah, I was 17. And wandering around Europe, 17.
Yeah,
and it
that's
was
young.
great. It was fine. I
Sure.
didn't have any problems. And then I came back. I went to school for 2 years, saved some money, and went back and lived overseas in Europe and worked over there. Then I went back, finished college, and went over to Europe again and wound up in Israel. And I did a lot of, and somebody once said to me once, they said, what are you looking for? And I hadn't thought about it like that, but I think I was a seeker, but I really was a seeker for truth.
Yeah.
And what was funny was I grew up very postmodern. And, you got your truth and that's your truth. I got mine. And I was about 21 years old. And I tell the story. I was in a pizza parlor in Gainesville, Florida. And I was eating a pizza and I was reading a philosopher. And the philosopher said something that kicked into my mind that, hey, there's the pizza on the table. Something explained the pizza.
Sure.
Okay, something somewhere out there, maybe nobody can know where the pizza came from or whatever, but somewhere there was an answer for it. And then it hit me. There's the universe. There's the reality. There's something here. Maybe it's all an illusion. Maybe we're all in the matrix, and that's fine. That would be the truth. But it hit me that there had to be a truth. And for some reason, I remember thinking to myself, if it were humanly possible, because my realization that truth had to exist is a complete, the fancy word ontology.
Sure.
There's there's something here.
Yep.
But that's a totally separate thing from another fancy word, epistemology.
Sure.
My knowledge
The
of it.
theory of knowledge.
Yeah. The fact that it was there was a totally separate question from whether I could know what it was. And I realized I might not ever know what it was. But I thought to myself, if I could know what it was, I wanted to know it. I didn't care where it led me, what it cost me, what I had to suffer, what I had to give up.
Well, it was going to lead you and it was going to cost you.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, ultimately, you understand what I mean by that, but in the immediate term, it was going to cost you. So how do you find yourself peering into a Bible and saying, I think this might be the revelation of what's true?
That gets to be, I I was a born-again believer before I even knew I was a sinner. Okay? I was born. And the bottom line was, you asked about the novel. That novel was my God. Okay? And then I had some amazing experiences. Just, when I tell my story, people look at me like they almost can't, but they think some people have accused me of lying. I've had people say that got me open to that there was something out there.
For example?
Oh, well, maybe we'll catch that the next, because to try to explain that.
It's that big, huh?
Yeah. You asked me that because I just need a little bit more time for that. But I had these things that opened me, and the bottom line was, I came home to my room one night to work on this novel. I had put 2.5 years of my life in the novel. It meant more to me than life itself. And I remember I was having these spiritual experiences. I was open to something spiritual. I sat there, and right before I started to work, I closed my eyes and I uttered a little prayer. I didn't know who I was praying to, whatever. And in the back, see, the devil had me. I was having these occult experiences. I was in the occult, and I even started writing about the occult. So Satan had me. And then somehow in the back and forth of the great controversy, that little prayer was all the opening God needed me. And at that moment, the presence of the Lord Jesus Christ came to me in the room. And in that instant, he showed me I knew exactly who he was and what he wanted. And he said, Cliff, you've been playing with me long enough. If you want me tonight, burn your novel. Because he showed me that novel was my God, and you shall have no other gods before me. Now, I didn't know that Bible text. I didn't know if Moses was in the New Testament or the Old Testament. That's how biblical illiterate I was. But I knew I met God that night. And he showed me instantly, this novel was my God. And I just knew I can't do both. And it was totally free choice. 2 things came through to me that night. And I can wax eloquent for hours on philosophically why free will is impossible. Okay, even though I believe it, because my faith makes no sense without it. And plus, that night, I knew it was totally my free choice. I mean, I knew it was as clear to me. And the other thing too, which is very spooky to me, I knew that if I don't do it now, I'll never have this opportunity again. But how did I know that? I mean, I was having occult experiences. I took the God-given gift that God had given to me. That's a little redundant. But I started writing about my occult experience. I started weaving it into the novel. So in the bottom line, I could have spent the past 40 years writing for the other guy, for the other side, instead of for the Lord. And had I been doing that, I wouldn't have gotten out.
No. And you felt that at that time. You felt like this is now or never.
Yeah, for whatever reason. I mean, knowing nothing. I didn't even know I was a sinner. But I knew if I don't do this now, I'll never have another opportunity.
There's more. We got to hear the more. We've got to hear the more. And we want to hear about the more. There's plenty more. Don't go too far. I'll be back in just a moment with more with Clifford Goldstein.
Hello, I'm Dr. David DeRose, a specialist in internal medicine and preventive medicine. And I've been surprised over the years in working with patients and studying the medical research literature just how powerful hemorrheology is when it comes to health. You may be wondering, what is hemorrheology? Well, I call it the Methuselah factor, and that's the title of my book. The Methuselah factor really helps you connect with things that can help your blood be more fluid. You say, why is that important? It's important because it can help you decrease your risk of a stroke or a heart attack, even lower your risk of cancer. But it's a whole lot more than just preventing killer diseases. If you improve your blood fluidity, your mind will work better, you'll perform physically better, and you'll decrease your risk of dementia. So don't hesitate. Dive into the Methuselah factor. Make a difference in your life and the life of those that you love.
You know that at It Is Written, we are serious about studying the Word of God, and we encourage you to be serious as well. Well, here's what you do if you want to dig deeper into God's Word. Go to itiswritten.study for the It Is Written Bible Study Guides online. 25 in-depth Bible studies that will take you through the major teachings of the Bible. You'll be blessed, and it's something you'll want to tell others about as well. Itiswritten.study. Go further. Itiswritten.study.
If you enjoy coloring, then you are going to love the Buried Treasure Coloring Book from My Place with Jesus. The Buried Treasure Coloring Book has more than just pictures to color. You'll also enjoy activity pages, each accompanied by their very own audio story.
Mr. Dixon came across a small, well-weeded rice patch out in the middle of a field.
Get ahead of a rainy day or a relaxing evening as a family and order the Buried Treasure Coloring Book from It Is Written.
Welcome back to Conversations. My guest is Clifford Goldstein, who today is a writer, a prolific writer, and an author, an influential author. But a few years ago, you took a novel that you'd been writing for 2.5 years.
40 years, yeah. 40 years ago.
Placed it in a fireplace.
Hot on a little 2-burner hot plate.
Set fire to it.
Burned it, yeah. And people got to remember, too, I've been telling the story for decades, and I got to I told it once, even locally, and someone said the teacher came up to me later and said, the kid said, well, what was the big deal? Didn't he have it stored in the cloud?
Oh, yeah, that's right. Hadn't you backed it up?
Yeah, I was using a manual typewriter.
Yeah.
We were 25 years. What was the big deal? It was burning his novel. Did he have it in the cloud? You know,
I'm reminded of Abraham. God says, kill your son. He didn't quite understand this, but okay, I'm going to go and do it. Figured God would be able to raise him up. And here you're hearing from God, burn this novel.
Yeah.
So what in your mind, you're about to set fire to it. What happens after it's gone? I mean, this is where your life was going.
I had no idea.
Is that so?
I mean, when I burned that novel that night, I mean, I was born again. But if you would have said to me that night, Cliff, you're a sinner, I wouldn't have known what you were talking about.
Right.
It was just not, in other words, all I knew was I met God and Jesus, and I had to burn the novel. And you know, in one sense, it was fortunate. There's a fancy philosophical phrase, you've probably heard of it, tabula rasa. I was a blank slate. I mean, I knew almost nothing about Christian theology, Christian thought. I mean, I knew nothing. And so I was wide open to learn the truths that I learned. I didn't have years of false teaching.
Right. You didn't have a lot of unlearning to do.
Yeah, oh no.
Hey, but what that means also is that you could be influenced in any direction.
Oh.
You didn't have any parameters to keep you this way or that way.
I was involved. I was total. But I had all this zeal.
Yeah.
And the next thing, people who knew me. There's Cliff Goldstein running around with the Bible, talking about Jesus, and people were shocked. In fact, I used to harangue Christians. There used to be this hellfire and brimstone preacher. His name is Jed Smock, and he used to come to the University of Florida at Gainesville, and he'd stand out there in a circle, and he'd be preaching, and there'd be students around him and heckle him, and I used to get in the center of the circle. And I'd get on his heels, I'd curse him, I'd curse his Bible, and he was a charismatic.
Yeah.
And he'd put hands on my head and speak in tongues, cast demons out of me. And I'd start drooling and writhing just for the fun of it. And it got so bad, my friends eventually nicknamed me Heckle. I was nicknamed Heckle. But then one day, he came back and I got next to him in the crowd and witnessed to the students about my belief in Jesus.
There's a turnaround. I'm interested to know why you bothered to heckle a guy when you didn't have any strong religious leanings of your own.
Well, you know, he had said to me something one time. He had said to me something. You who scream the loudest are fighting the hardest. And, you know, it was very funny because there was another Jewish guy who used to go out and harangue him with me. And he ended up becoming a believer too.
Oh, really?
You know, so I think the Holy Spirit was drawing me even before I had any idea.
Sure.
Because again, it goes back, I was a seeker for truth. It hit me that truth had to exist.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
for some reason, I don't like to use the word sacred because that denotes too much the idea of something religious. It was almost a duty, a secular duty.
Yeah.
Truth exists. You need to go to try to find a way to find it if you can. And I never ended up thinking it would be Jesus.
So how did you find Jesus then? If Jesus was the truth you found, Jesus was the truth
I knew
you
it
found.
was him who came to me that night.
Okay.
That night. I mean, I knew it was Jesus.
So where did you start?
Well, I had met, here's something that some of your listeners will appreciate. I started having occult experiences. Okay, and I'm thinking, wow, maybe the occult, maybe spiritualism is where the truth is that I'm looking for. And so I one day walk over to the library at the University of Florida. Even though I wasn't in school, I could still go into the library. And I'm going to get a book on the occult. Well, as we talked earlier, I was a starving writer, and I needed a job. And, and I did not like vegetarians, okay? I didn't like Christians, and I didn't like vegetarians, okay? And there was a health food store. And I was desperate enough to thought, oh, what will the man give in exchange for his soul? I'm going to hang around a bunch of tofu-eating veggie people. But I needed a job. So I go to this health food store and I knock on the door. It was closed. And I had met him the day before under a funny circumstance. And this little guy comes out and we start talking. And I said to him something about my occult stuff. And he says, what? And he pulls me in the health food store and he locks the door. And we sit down and he starts talking to me. And I'm telling him about my occult, his astral projections and all that. And he starts warning me about the devil. Well, the devil, I mean, telling me the devil, he might as well told me that Santa Claus wouldn't come down the chimney on Christmas if I'm a bad boy.
Right.
I mean, it was just, the devil,
Sure.
in that mind frame, are you kidding me? And anyway, before I leave, he says, read this book. And he hands me a book, okay? And as a writer, I'm a reader. I mean, I just read. To this day, I just read. That's all I do. I have almost no hobbies. I just read. I read and write. So he gives me the book, and I walk over to the library, and I get a book on the occult, okay? And I sit down in the library. First time in my life, I sit there, and I read the first chapter of the occult book, and I practice the first technique. And I'm hesitant. My wife tells me don't tell what you did, but maybe people ought to know. But the first technique they tell you is stare at a point in the back of your head. Okay, that's all but anyway, I'm sitting there, so I'm doing that, and then I'm done, because I said I was having these occult experiences. I mean, they're real. My interpretation of them was wrong, but I'm thinking maybe this is the truth that I'm looking for. Okay?
Sure.
Because you have one or two astral projections and reality is more than just what they taught you in high school physics, okay? But anyway, to make a long story short, I've got the occult book in one hand for the first time in my life, and I'm going to put it back on the shelf. And literally, in my other hand, for the first time in my life, I got the book the guy handed me in the health food store. Occult book in one hand, The Great Controversy by Ellen White in another. And I was clueless. As to what was going on. And I read the first couple chapters of The Great Controversy. I was enjoying it and so on. Hadn't got to the spiritualism stuff yet. And then it was 2 nights later when the Lord came to me and told me to burn my novel. And when I gave my heart to Jesus that night, those occult experiences didn't come back.
That's interesting.
Didn't come back. But here a cult book in one hand, and oh my goodness.
And that's The Great Controversy playing out.
I was living it
right there.
and I was totally oblivious to what happened. But you asked earlier about the events that happened that got me,
Yeah.
believe, okay, I can't go through all the details, but I'll tell you this main thing. I had been living overseas, living in Israel, lived on a kibbutz in Israel. And then I was in Europe, and I was just having problems. My things were just kind of spiraling down for me. And I still remember I was in Paris. And I even remember the spot where I was, because my wife has been hearing me tell the story for decades. And we were in Paris a number of years ago. And I said, this is right where I was standing when I had this moment. It was one of these moments where whether I shook a fist up in the air or not, I said, God, if you're there, I need a sign. And little did I know that what does Scripture say? Greeks seek for wisdom, Jews seek for a sign. I knew nothing about that.
Amazing?
I knew nothing. And I'm sitting there totally oblivious to the Bible.
Yeah.
And I said, God, if you're there, I need a sign. Otherwise, I will never believe ever. Okay? And with that, I left. And I went back to Israel. And I had met these Christians there earlier, and I told them, I said, well, I asked God for a sign. If God is there, and someone said, if you ask, God will reveal himself to you. All right, fine. Well, 2 days later, I go to the main office in Tel Aviv to get assigned to a new kibbutz. And I go into the office, and there's a woman at the desk, and there's a boy sitting ahead of me. And I'm waiting my turn, and I look over on the desk, and I see a sheet of paper, and it has my name on it, Clifford Goldstein. And so I said to the woman, I said, excuse me, how did you know I was coming? And she says, I don't know, who are you? And I said, Clifford Goldstein. And the boy who's there, he jumps up and says, no, that's my paper. My name is Clifford Goldstein. Okay, now sure, Clifford Goldstein's not the most common name in the world, but look, I was in Tel Aviv, okay? And then I said, Cliff, where are you from? And he said, Miami Beach. And I grew up in Miami Beach. In fact, when I told my mother the story later, she said, when I was a kid, his doctor bills used to come to my house. Okay?
Oh, really?
Said he was there to get assigned to a kibbutz. And I said, Cliff, have I got the kibbutz for you? You go to my old kibbutz and tell them your name is Clifford Goldstein and you're from Miami Beach and see what happens, okay? So he goes to the kibbutz. Well, about 2 weeks later, I'm not getting it together. I'm going to go home, but I go back to the kibbutz for a visit. And of all the different rooms they put volunteers in, Clifford Goldstein was in the same room that I had been in when I had left the kibbutz months earlier. And there were 2 beds in the room. And he was sleeping in the same bed that I had been in. So he's sitting on his bed, and I'm sitting at the edge of the bed, and we're laughing. It's a little uncanny. I don't think that, we're not thinking that much of it. Now, as I said, I was a writer, okay, and I did a lot of reading. And when I left the kibbutz, I had a whole bunch of books that I left on the bookshelf over my bed. And there was one book in particular, a book of poetry by a woman named Sylvia Plath that so impacted me. I mean, when I tell the story to friends who lived on the kibbutz, I said, remember, I used to make you sit there and listen to me read her poems, whether you wanted to or not. I mean, the stuff just devastated me. Nothing I had read had impacted me more. And I look up over the bookshelf, and I see a number of my old books. And I said, Cliff, you like my books? And he says, what are you talking about? He said, those are all my books.
Oh, you're kidding.
And I said, no way. And I stood up and I went right for the Sylvia Plath book. Same author, same everything, but it wasn't my book. It was his book. And I thought, what kind of dork reads this stuff other than me? And I said, Cliff, are you a writer? And he says, I'm thinking of becoming a writer, and I came to Israel to write, which is what I was doing.
Yeah.
Then on top of it, when I was on the kibbutz, I had a blonde Danish girlfriend. Her name was Tina. We're talking, and as we're talking, this girl walks into the room. I never saw her before. It was his girlfriend. She's blonde. She's from Denmark.
And her name is?
And her name was Tina.
No way.
Okay, yeah, I'm telling you, this is exactly.
That's wild.
And then I'll never forget. See, the Christians, I knew these Christians there, they were there, and one of them said to me, I never forget his words to me. He looked at me and he was just incredulous, and he says, Cliff, you're asking God for signs. He says, man, what more do you want? The Lord is calling you by name.
Yeah.
And I mean, at that point, when he said that to me, I didn't know. I remember standing there and I'm thinking about this. And I'm trying to process it. And I'm thinking, I asked for a sign. And I realized this can't be a coincidence. Okay? And if it's not a coincidence, it was like for the first time, I kind of look up in the sky with a little bit of fear and a little bit of reverence, okay? Because I know. But anyway, the bottom line was these Christians, and I used to harangue and harass them too, they took me down to the Jordan River, which was just near the kibbutz. They baptized me. They gave me a Bible, and I come back to America. But really, I was no more born again than a corpse.
Sure.
Okay? I mean, I read they gave me the Bible, but I reading the Bible, if you're not into it, I couldn't get past the talking snake story,
sure.
And so on. It took, but that was the background, and it took about a month later for the Lord came to me in the room, told me to burn my novel. When I burned the novel, that was the night I became a born-again believer, okay? And it was the people in the health food store were really the first Christian contact that I had. And I studied with them in the store. And it was funny too, because maybe a month later, I'm standing in front of the health food store, getting ready to cross the street, and a car drives by. And who do you think's in the car? Clifford Goldstein. Clifford Goldstein. The last time I saw him was in the Galilee. And to this day, I could still see the stunned look on his face. And I think I've tracked him down. He's out in LA. I've tried to get in touch with him. He just has ignored me and so on. But that got my attention. But even then, that helped open me up to God intellectually.
Yeah.
But I had to be born again. I had to be broken. When I burned that novel, I had nothing. I had nothing. I poured everything in it when, people were saying, we knew you couldn't do it, and the devil would throw stuff. In fact, it was very funny because the night that the Lord told me to burn the novel, it was going better than it had ever been going. And I wondered, of all the nights, why this? And then a little while later, the devil hit me. You were afraid you couldn't do it. And I stopped. And I said, no. Had I had the slightest doubt about me writing that novel, that night, boom, it would have been, the devil would have had a hook on me. But I'm thinking, no. I burned the novel when the nets were filled.
Right.
And that's a very important lesson here.
I'm going to ask you this very quickly. Do you remember the story you wrote well, and was it any good?
Yeah, I remember the story.
All right.
Was any good? How do you mean good? Was there anything? It was ultimately a story about family.
Do you look back and say, that might really have flown?
No. I shudder. I shudder to think what would have happened had I not burned that novel.
Really?
And I look back now. Suppose I had written it, and suppose it made me rich, and suppose it made me famous. The Hebrew word, vanity of vanity, all is vanity. Hevel, hevelim, kol hevelim. Vanity of vanities. It meant nothing.
Sure.
It means, and I look to this day at some of these great novels, and no, I have never been sorry. Woo! So.
Yeah, those are good words. I've never been sorry. More good words in a moment. I'll be back with more from Cliff Goldstein just a second. He's the strongest man who ever lived, but he's defined today as much by his weakness as by his strength. Called by God to deliver his people in a time of great apostasy, Samson was gifted with superhuman strength, but Samson's weaknesses were his undoing. Don't miss Great Characters of the Bible, the story of Samson. Learn how you can avoid the mistakes Samson made. Discover how your weaknesses do not have to define your life. And celebrate the goodness of a God who can use anyone for His glory. Great Characters of the Bible, the story of Samson, a story of opportunity, hope, and the goodness of God. Great Characters of the Bible, Samson. Watch now on It Is Written TV.
More and more people are watching It Is Written TV. They're watching their favorite It Is Written programs, listening to inspiring sermon series, and much more. They're watching them here, and even here. See for yourself why people are turning to It Is Written TV to watch their favorite Christian programs live and on demand. Watch It Is Written TV for free anytime on Roku, Apple TV, and at itiswritten.tv.
Welcome back to Conversations. My guest is Cliff Goldstein. So Cliff, you burned the novel. You've become a Christian. I used to work in radio, and I decided I can't do that anymore. I got to get out. I'm done. So I gave my life to Jesus. No more radio. There was the temptation. Maybe you can still do that. No, not possible. Yeah. But the thought came to my mind, can you do Christian radio? So I toyed with that idea. It wasn't that straightforward. You're not going to be a novelist now, but somewhere back there you had to be thinking, can I write for Jesus?
Well, when I burned that novel that night, I died to it. I realized I might not ever write again. Okay, I mean, it was that much of a hold on me. And I was okay with it. Yeah. I had no idea but that's what it took. That was okay. And for about 1.5 years, I didn't do any writing. Then one day, a door opened up for me to write an article. And it was funny because I mentioned I didn't like vegetarians. And the first article I wrote and published was on the advantages of vegetarianism.
Oh.
And I hadn't stopped writing since
then.
And sometimes when I tell the story, particularly with young people, I stress that. I died to it, but in the Lord's timing, He gave it back, and that's all I've been doing ever since, is writing ever since. And it's not a God to me. I love it. It's what I do. It's how I earn a living. But it's totally different now. So, yeah.
Yeah. You began to write Christian books. What was the first book you wrote?
The first book I wrote was called The Saving of America. And it was a look at last day events through the church's prophetic lens, America in prophecy and so on. And then I wrote a book after called, the title was Bestseller. And it was my conversion story for I wrote that up. And then I've written about 25 books since then. And it's funny, I've written all these books. Most of them are out of print. Most of them flopped. As I said, you write what's in you. Yeah, I don't care. I write what's in me. But I wrote this one book, and I wrote it in 1988. And to this day, no matter where I go, in fact, I was in Australia about 1.5 years ago, and some surfer dude looked like 18 years old with long blonde hair, a wool cap on his head. He comes up to me and he thanks me for this book called 1844 Made Simple.
Yeah.
And I probably get more people thanking me for that than all my books put together.
I want to ask you about that. It's a significant book. It's not a great big book.
No.
But it's a powerfully important book. Tell me about the why behind that book.
Well, that's I joined the Adventist Church in 1980. It was just again how much we go to just the time of crisis and turmoil, and there was this doctrine came under attack and so forth. And I felt like it was central. And I thought to myself, if I can't get this from the Bible and the Bible alone, That was the key thing for me. I can't get this from the Bible, then I'm out of here. See, in many ways, to have joined the church at this time, as painful as it was the best thing that ever happened to me.
Sure.
Because I was forced early on. I mean, some of the Sabbath, that's a no-brainer.
Sure it is. Yeah.
Sabbath is a no-brainer.
Easiest thing in the world. Yeah.
State of the Dead. Oh my goodness. When you look at it.
What are the alternatives to that?
Yeah.
Nothing makes sense.
Yeah.
That's
Sabbath,
easy.
State of the Dead.
Yeah.
Second coming, Christ's substitutionary atonement.
Sure.
And so on. But this was the one. This was the one the only one that's distinctly ours. All the others you could find someone, and I was as green as can be, but I just went and here's the irony. Very little of what I wrote in that book was anything new.
Sure.
Was anything that
That's right.
These were truths
Yeah.
that were always there. And
Yep.
yet somehow over time they got buried. And I just went back and really in many ways, the key to everything is Daniel 2.
Sure. Yes, it is.
You understand Babylon, Media, Persia, Greece. After Greece, there's only one power that comes up after Greece. One power, it changes form, it goes same power all the way to the end of the world. Okay? You understand that 90% of the error that comes in, because Daniel 2, Daniel 7, one power, one beast, all the way to the end. Daniel 8, you got the ram, the goat, the little horn, one power all the way to the end of the world.
Right.
And you parallel them, you got that basic, and then you've got this massive judgment scene in Daniel 7. Okay, a massive pre-Advent judgment. I mean, it's there. 3 times you got the little horn, judgment, second coming. 3 times, boom, boom, boom. So you got that, and you parallel that with Daniel 8, and between Daniel 2 and Daniel 7 and Daniel 8, Babylon, Media, Persia, and Greece are all named for you.
That's right.
They're named for you. And then you bring in, when Jesus talks about, when you see that spoken of by the prophet Daniel, well, what power was he talking about? The whole New Testament takes place in Rome. It's Rome all the way through. And then when you just parallel Daniel 2, Daniel 7, and Daniel 8, and you parallel that cleansing of the judgment scene in heaven with the cleansing of the sanctuary in Daniel 8, you got it. You're 90% of the way there.
Sure.
So really, in the end, I think the thing that made that book so successful, it was simple, because I was still new. I mean, I had written like 15 years later, I wrote a book called Graffiti in the Holy of Holies,
sure.
which was like 1844 made simple 15 years later, and it was much deeper. I think it was a better book because I fleshed out, I got the gospel in it, I brought the gospel in, but nobody bought it. Nobody bought it because I think, number one, it was a little too complicated, and by that time, too, things had kind of settled down.
Yeah, the book spoke to a need,
Yeah.
a very definite need, and it made simple,
yeah.
what. So pastors have got to take a little blame for this. Preachers, I think theologians have got to man up and take a little blame for this as well. It should be simple, for goodness sake.
Yeah.
If Jesus didn't say anything about feeding giraffes, he spoke about feeding sheep.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be simple.
Sure.
And some of us have a happy knack of taking simple and making it complicated.
Yeah.
Some of it is ego, I'm sure. Look how clever I am.
Oh, yeah.
Why should I come down to your level? I want you to look up at mine and admire me.
Yeah, oh,
but
yeah.
I don't know what the rest is. Sometimes it's tradition. Sometimes it's this is just how we have to do it. The doctrine's got to be simple. The Bible teaching's got to be simple. Jesus taught in such a way that the pointy-headed people got it, but also the young people walked away saying, I know what he's talking about. So I think that's part of the genius behind that book.
And I think what helped me too was I was raised and educated. I was able to look at things with fresh eyes.
That's right.
That's what it was. I was able to look at things with fresh eyes. And so, and I still believe it as strongly now as I ever did.
Yeah, thank God for that. There's something else you believe strongly, and I want to ask you about this. You write, talk passionately, repeatedly about creation. Creation versus evolution. Creation, not evolution? Why are you so passionate about that?
Well, I'll be blunt, and if evolution's true, you don't have to worry about going to hell because there is no hell.
Sure.
If evolution is true, the Bible is a lie, Jesus is a liar, Paul is a liar. Everything we believe, everything is destroyed by evolution. And see, the honest secular, the Richard Dawkins and some of these guys, I have an immense amount more respect for them than I do for the theistic evolutionists.
Sure.
Because these guys, Dawkins knows. He knows there's no way.
It's one or the other.
Yeah, there's no possible way. And I've been very disappointed there are certain Christian apologists. There's one guy that I have immense amount of respect for in so many ways. Genius, 2 PhDs. His name is William Lane Craig, and brilliant apologist. And it just breaks my heart that William Lane Craig has bought into evolution.
So I want you to tell me why, in your opinion, these guys do that. Why do they do that? They look at the Bible, the same
Sure.
Bible we look at. They see how prevalent and central the creation story is. They know that evolution springs from a place that's virulently opposed to the gospel. And instead of taking a stand, they try and blend these things together. There's a fusion of truth and error. Why is that their approach, do you think?
Well, again, I don't know individual hearts, but
Sure, I understand.
every age has its myths. And you say, well, we don't have myths, we have science.
Yeah.
But see, that's the great myth of our age because it's science. Science is very powerful. The science works. You build rockets, you go to the moon, you use your cell phones. And again, I could go off on this for a long time because it's fascinating. But the fact that the science works
Yeah.
and that you could get workable technology from it is a totally separate issue from whether the theory behind it is correct.
Mm-hmm.
And the history of science is filled with theories that made predictions that worked that nobody believes anymore. Okay, so but I guess the bottom line is a thing called scientism. Well, maybe they're not scientism because that would be that. The bottom line is the power of science and the culture. We're told there's overwhelming evidence for this.
Right.
There's overwhelming, and when you hear it, and see, here's the thing. Well, I'll give you a real quick example what happened to me early on because I got hit. Well, it's funny. I'm born again. And I have a whole new set of first principles.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, a whole new set of first principles. Just boom, overnight, I realized almost everything I believed at the most foundational level was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And then early on, though, I felt this tension between what I had just experienced and evolution. And I remember I struggled with this. Even back then at the most base, I knew nothing. At this point, I may be beginning to even understand I'm a sinner. Okay, this is how, and I remember I struggled with this. And the people I studied with kept on saying, don't worry about it. But, finally they could see that and they gave me some creationist book. And see, I have no idea if the creationist book is any good or not. Some of the creationist literature could be, I think, as hokey as some of the, quote, bona fide evolutionary stuff. But I had the scales come off my eyes as I read that book. And this is, in many ways, it's very broad, but this gets to the point. Look, nobody denies the dinosaur bones are in the ground.
Right.
Nobody denies the fossils are in the ground.
Sure.
Okay? But I was 23, 24 years old. It was the first time that I would ever been shown in my life that there's another way to interpret how the fossils got there.
Sure, yeah.
And see, my whole life, and see, this comes to a fundamental weakness in all of science, okay? That no matter what theory you have, somebody else could come along later and overthrow the theory
right.
and give a different explanation for it. And The bottom line is they're told you're able to interpret the evidence in ways to fit evolution.
Yeah.
Okay? And I just think when you hear it over and over and over and they're shown the stuff, they believe it.
Yeah.
If evolution is true, then the Bible's a lie. The Bible's a lie. There's no question about it.
I couldn't agree more with you. In certain areas, it takes a little courage to believe creation. It should never be that way in the church, certainly in science. I spoke with a PhD in Boston who told me, there's a reason. He described himself as a recovering atheist. He said, you get into that scientific academic realm, you're being reviewed by your peers. He said, there's no way. You learn to conform or your career is dead. That was what he told me.
The irony is, it's the most obvious thing in the world.
Sure it is.
Design.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
That's
Design is the most obvious thing in the world, and yet at the most fun. And if you even hint at it, here's how I describe it too. Why it's because they don't allow it. Imagine there's a murder, and you're let's say you murdered someone, okay? And I'm the police detective, and I come in, and right off the bat, I rule out John Bradshaw. I say he absolutely did not commit the murder. Then whomever I arrest by default is what? Is innocent, is wrong, okay? And because God created the world, because the world is designed, but if you by absolute a priori default, you absolutely rule it out, whatever you're gonna come up with is wrong.
That's right.
And you got this evolution, they got ears, breathing ears. Mm-hmm, they got monkeys that they say rafted from Africa to South America. Whales once had hind legs and walked on land before. These are some of the myths, but it's science. It comes under the imprimatur of science. And I think too, for a lot of Christians, they don't want to be seen, unfortunately, as a bunch of hicks.
No, that's right.
They don't want to be seen as hicks. And I've been exceedingly disappointed on how many Christians, it's always been the trouble of Christianity compromising with the culture. The whole ancient Israel,
sure,
compromising with the culture. The apostasy of the early church, compromising with the culture. And I think there's no greater compromise with the culture today in Christianity than the acceptance of evolution. So that's whatever.
Outstanding. I wish we had time for more.
Sure. This was fun.
Maybe we'll do it again.
Sure.
Clifford, thanks so much.
Sure.
I really appreciate your time.
Great.
And thank you for joining us. Greatly appreciate you taking your time. He's Clifford Goldstein. I'm John Bradshaw. This has been our conversation.